we can get a thumbs up in the chat or just a thumbs up in the reaction to make sure that everyone can hear me and everything sounds okay. We This is an interactive course, so at some parts of this course, I'm going to show your guys' faces, and we're all going to be able to interact with each other. I really encourage us to interact. I think that dialogue does create change, so there's going to be some interactive things in here. So if you have the space, if you're in a loud space, I just suggest during those times that we are doing the discussions. If you can join, I would really appreciate that because I think that these types of courses really do well with your guys' interactions in your discussions. So I'm just going to do a brief bio. A lot of you guys know me because you're here because of the platform. So, my name is Carlos Dillard. I'm a transracial adoptee as well as a former foster youth, and I'm also an adoption educator. It is my goal to eventually change the foster care and adoption systems. But as we are trying to change these systems, I think it's important for us to educate along the way, right? So this course is called Say It Safer. It's a trauma-informed language course for foster and adoptive care, right? So that's anyone who's going to be working with any children that are not theirs. And even if these, you can take some of these skills, and I think a lot of my courses are not monolithic just for foster care and adoption. You can really apply these skills with your own children, but it's really important for us to be trauma informed when we are working with children coming from extreme trauma. So, like I said, my name is Carlos Dillard. I am an adoption educator. I am also a 3 times published author, and I spend most of my time really just advocating and educating online, mostly in person conferences. My last large conference was at the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, where I spoke to over 5,000 doctors about how they could be more trauma informed and knowing about over medicating foster youth and the stacking systems and how that works. So that's a little bit about me. I'm sure you guys can learn more if you want to just research me and look it up in the links in my bio. So there's a little bit that we're going to be going through inside of this course, okay? So inside of this course, oops, sorry, went a little bit too fast, double clicked. Inside of this course, we're going to be going over what is trauma informed language, all right? The importance of trauma informed language, right? How to use trauma informed language, and the benefits of trauma informed language for kids in care. So before we start with the course, I do want to have an open reflection, and I want you guys to share. So I'm going to actually bring you guys up. Everyone who's here, welcome, welcome, welcome. Show your beautiful faces. And then I'm going to ask you to unmute. Um, Give me one after the reflection. So the opening reflection is going to be think about a time when someone's word made you feel small or safe. What made the difference? And we can start with Diana. Diana, you there? If not, then Ashley.
Hello, my name is Ashley Green. I am a therapist in New Jersey and Ohio. Um, I guess a time that someone made me feel small, I guess, is just assuming that everyone that was around them. And so when I was in college, I was kind of a small percentage of that university that was there on like financial aid. And so I had a lot of friends that were like very affluent and had like Mercedes Benzes, and I was over here working 2 jobs. And I think, excuse me, that's my dog. Um, so I think a time that someone made me feel small was assuming that I had similar experiences as them, and just by blatantly assuming, even though I had to work about 2 or 3 times harder than a lot of the people I was surrounded with. A time that I felt safe was just maybe being validated in different scenarios, and yeah, I
I love
think that is my experience. Thank you.
that. And we're going to actually go over assumption and how assumption can actually harms children who are experiencing trauma. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to invite anyone else, Akira or Diana, or Hope I see you down there, or Ron. No volunteers? No volunteers?
I guess I could go. I guess a time that I felt small is probably during foster care when I was through it. I was told I was an unloved child. That's why I was there. And I think a time that I felt safe was when I finally became an adult and I could control what happens to me.
I love that. I love that. Anyone else?
I will go. My name is Hope. I would say a time that I felt really small in life, was when I was dealing with the aftermath of my adopted mother passing. It was a situation where my adopted father was the fault of my adopted mom passing. Um, and where I felt really small is that there was no judicial ruling to put things into play as far as getting retribution or justice for her. And I felt incredibly small due to a surplus of family dysfunction popping up. And where I came out on top of it was in the aftermath of it after going no contact and as well going through therapy.
I love that. And the reason why I brought up this open reflection is to really ground us in this space. And it matters, and why language matters in itself, and thinking about our own experiences, how those experiences could have been changed had our parents or guardians used trauma informed language. And I think it's very important for us to understand that. So I appreciate you all. I'm going to go ahead and drop you guys back down into the next discussion period. So I'm going to hide everybody. Alrighty, and then we're going to move right on along. Thank you guys so much for your participation during that section. I really appreciate it. So, the next section is, what is trauma informed language? A lot of people use words on the internet specifically, like trauma informed, and they'll say, I'm trauma informed. But are they really? Right? Trauma informed language is a way of speaking to and about children and teens. And like I said, this is not just about foster care and adoption, it's just to any child, but especially those impacted by foster care, adoption, and family separation, with care and awareness and respect for their lived experiences. So that means that we're not only saying, yes, we're being trauma informed, but we're actually putting actions behind our words. A lot of the times I find in this industry, I like to, it's because that's what it is. People say the right things, but they're not doing the right things, right? Specifically with children, right? When we are trauma informed, we should be trauma informed with all children. But like I keep reiterating, with children who've experienced severe trauma, we have to be really aware of how we're treating them and what we're saying, right? With this awareness, in respect to their lived experience, it recognizes the words that can hurt, right? And that the youth who have experienced extreme trauma, language plays a powerful role in how they shape their safety, their trust, and their identity. So when I was growing up, when people used bad language to me, that was one of the keys that, like a key point that I knew I couldn't trust you. I was in a lot of foster homes, and I automatically knew, right, that if it's going to be a safe place, if the foster parent was using language, I didn't know it was called trauma informed then, but it was just like language that made me feel better, right? Using a lot of you statements and me statements instead of I statements. We're gonna go look over some videos later on in the course, and I'm gonna ask you guys to pull out some issues with these videos when the parents is not being trauma informed, and how that might affect the child. So for me, hearing language like, "Oh, you weren't wanted," right? Or, "I'm only keeping you because you're not wanted." Well, thank you. Maybe I'm not sure, because that's you're only keeping me because I'm not wanted. But if I'm not wanted, how are you keeping me? Right? So it's really important that we use language that promotes safety and trust for the child in your care, right? That's also going to build respect. A lot of folks think that children have to earn respect, and it's actually the opposite. We have to earn our children's respect. They didn't ask to be here, and especially children in your external child care, they definitely didn't ask to be there, right? So they don't have to earn your respect. You need to earn their respect, and you can start with that by the way that you speak, speaking to the child as a whole person, not just their case, not just their behavior. If you guys know anything about my adopted mother, she refers to me even to this day as her RAD child, right? RAD is reactive attachment disorder. And when I see her comments in Facebook groups or even on her Facebook, it still stings because even after almost what 20 years, 20 years, 24 years of past my post adoption, she's still referring to me as a diagnosis is not a and not a person, right? Um, we really need to highlight, and we'll see some language that we'll talk about later, like bad child, he was a bad child, or he was a hard child. No children are bad and no children are hard. Children are children, and it's a hard job to raise them, right? Another thing that it does when you use trauma informed language is that it affirms identity. And this is honoring how a child sees themselves, including their race, culture, gender, and family medical issues. So, right now, we actually are going through a crisis in the foster care system. I haven't made a video on it yet. I was thinking about making one tomorrow because I wanted to really wrap my head around what our president just did in his executive order. But what he just essentially did was made being queer in foster care illegal. After reading through his executive order and speaking to other analysts who are foster care advocates, you no longer can, as an agency or a state agency, require people to address, care for, or even respect children's identities, right? So as people who want to be trauma informed, we have to push back against that. So when we hear people even talk about race issues, culture issues, sexual identity issues. This is why on my platform we cover a lot of different issues because they all are going back into the foundation of our child welfare system, right? So the objectives of learning trauma-informed language is to kind of see it, right? And see if we can pull examples out of what other people are saying and doing. So I want to show you guys a few videos, and then I want you to, after each video, I'm going to unmute everyone, and then I want y'all's responses, right, of what was trauma informed or not trauma informed about these videos. Okay, so we're going to start with the first video. Let me know if y'all can hear it. You should be able to hear it. Okay. Uh-oh, hold on. I have to, my husband just taught me how to do this. Screen, stop sharing, share screen. This one, okay, perfect. Now you should be able to hear and see this. Let me know if you guys can. Why can't I hear it? Hold on.
A hefty list, so let's see what we can. We adopted 2 little Christmas angels, so let's go shopping. We're gonna do the little girl first because obviously I've never shopped for a girl, so let's find some Barbies. Okay. As you can tell, she gave us a hefty list, so let's see what we can do. They said to spend at least $30, so we're gonna aim for $30. So she definitely wants a Barbie doll, but my thing is I don't know what ethnicity she is, so I don't know her skin color, so I really don't know what kind of doll to get her. Yeah.
What is Baby Alive? What is Sparkle Brown? What is Baby Alive shampoo? Like, this aisle is nothing but Barbies. I don't know what.
We're boy parents. Found the Baby Alive, everybody. And that's the whole budget. So I bet you this is like the off-brand of Baby Alive because the packaging is almost identical and the dolls are almost identical. But I don't know how she feels about on-brand, off-brand.
Those eyes look crazy.
Look at those.
Yep, you're getting me in my sleep.
Okay, so she doesn't want a Baby Alive doll. She wants Baby Alive shampoo, and I cannot find that anywhere. So
They got food and diapers, and then powdered doll food.
okay, so she did ask for just a baby doll, so I think we should just go the baby doll route because we'll be able to get her at least a few items.
Perfect start, Carter.
Alright, so I think we're gonna go with this one because
It covers like 3 ethnicities.
it's only $10. Yeah, you don't know what ethnicity she is, so she's fine. And it has underpants and a headband outfit and pacifiers. And it's only $10, so we're gonna do this so we can get her some more stuff. So as I'm reading this, it's a lot of stuff that you really have to like look for and know what the heck you're looking for. Like it says Baby Alive shampoo, Snuggle Sophia, Barbie Dreamtopia, Mermaid Chelsea doll, like twirling Ariel toy. I don't even know. I feel bad, but I feel like we should just do the baby doll route. I mean, that's simple, right?
Yep,
Right?
you're so right.
Right. All right, you guys, I genuinely think we should do this with the stroller.
All right, so I'm gonna stop there because I already got about 3 things. So I'm gonna unhide you guys, and I will keep my opinions for last because I'm the teacher, so I've already seen this. I want you guys, and this is not just a person who's adopting, right? She's trying to help a child, I think, on the angel tree. And sometimes they do allow you to interact with these children when you hand off gifts. So, what were some of the things that were non-trauma informed that you heard her say or do in that short video? And whoever wants to go first can go first. Any volunteers? Y'all are real quiet today.
I
I
would
can.
say personally, the first thing that I noticed that wasn't very trauma informed was probably identifying the genders of her children that she personally has in the video. Just tying that into virtual safety.
Okay. And next person.
The first, this is Ashley speaking. I'm first of all, I want to say thank you for showing this because I did see this on TikTok and saw all the backlash. I will say what rubbed me the wrong way first was just her like implying that like it's a hefty list, and that's a bad thing. And kind of like throwing shade on it that it's a bad thing. I think anyone who knows anyone from a background that is more struggling, it's okay to know what you want because you're kind of used to not getting exactly what you want. So I would say that that was kind of like the first dig that I noticed.
Okay, that was kind of on my list as well. Anyone else before I share my list?
I think some of the other issue is she was concerned about what the child was picking out, very specific items. Well, kids know what they want to, I would say that. The other thing is she was very concerned about race with the toys of the child, and I'm guessing I don't know why that has to do with anything. Just I don't know.
So that's exactly what I picked up on. The first thing, you guys know me, the first thing I picked up on was race. And the issue is if you watch the video, the girl asked for a very specific type of doll, like down to the name of the doll, which I'm guessing has a specific race. And they said, well, we're not getting exactly what the child asked for. So if the child asked for something very specific, right? Then we should honor that. And that would have avoided so many other questions like, oh well, is this baby doll okay? Is this what they really don't want? And I think it was Ashley that said before, a lot of children in childcare or external care don't get people think that they can just give them the generic versions. I think even part of that video they said, oh, it's just the generic version, right? Now how does this relate to trauma informed language? Well, firstly, I don't know what race it is, not getting the child exactly what they want, what they ask for specifically for Christmas. You don't know what their ethnicity is. Them identifying the gender, like Hope said, applying a hefty lift. I think Ashley also said that. That's also such a key point because once again, it goes back to language. You don't want children to feel like a burden. A lot of foster youth already feel like a burden. So if they're just going to ask for something for Christmas, you don't want to be like, oh, it's such a big list. These kids probably have never gotten much for the holidays. So if it's a big list, I'm sure that you can engage in your community or just get them a few of the biggest things on the list and do what you can, but you don't have to say it like that, right? And I want people to realize when we record videos like this, it also does get seen by other children in the foster care system. So we're gonna watch another video really quickly.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I think I'm just like, I don't really understand why people, I think we know too much about everyone. So I think just the idea of going into a store and recording something like this and putting it on the internet, like that turns me off immediately. But like, there's something about it where, like for me, I've participated in these types of things, and for me, it feels like a very like sacred thing. Like I'm being very deliberate and choosing like what the child is asked for. And like the tone in this video, it just feels like very jokey and um I don't know. There's just something about the tone and the way that they're talking about things, or it just feels like flippant and jokey and like, well, I don't know, and just like I don't know. There's just something about it that really feels odd to me.
I think I would say performative.
Yes, yes. It just feels weird. Like, why are you putting that on the internet? Like, I don't know. It's just weird.
Well, all of this goes back to being trauma informed. And when using trauma informed language, I spoke about on my platform, understanding trauma informed history. A lot of folks do this for a clap on the back, just like a lot of
Mhm.
foster and adoptive parents help children for a clap on the back. So this is a great example of these people are trying to make these children feel grateful just for expecting the bare minimum of a doll. Really,
Yeah.
you're not doing much for the child besides buying a $30 doll. Like it's not like it's a, thank you, but it's like not you're not Saint Margaret here, right? So I definitely understand that. Hope, did you have your hand up?
I did. I kind of wanted to tie into that feelings of like it just being a very weirdly presented video. I think a lot of this ties into the fact that historically it has been socially acceptable to neglect children's needs and socially condition children to be grateful for anything that they receive. And I think for a lot of people on the viewing side of it, whether you come from middle class America, poverty, whatever it is, right? We're kind of socially conditioned as children that we get what we get and we don't throw a fit, right? So by default, I think that they're kind of playing into, if you will, the rage of that and that internal kind of strife kids have. I also think that, if you will, it's kind of their attempt to push back on a lot of the narratives of kids being entitled and just kind of getting the kid bare minimum. I don't know, like if you're on any of the parenting videos on social media, a lot of people are really quick to say, oh, kids these days are super entitled, right? So for them, it's almost partaking in an act of quote unquote humbling a child by not getting them what they want, causing additional strife. I think it really ties into the whole rage bait economy that we see, where a lot of people are very reactive to, again, content that's meant to induce rage, and just further solidifying, if you will, the commodification of children, whether they know them directly or indirectly.
Absolutely. You know what? That actually perfectly leads us into our next video that we're going to watch. So we're going to watch this video. It's like a 13, 14-second video. It's a prank, but I want you guys to listen to the language and pull out some things that could be harmful to children in care or just people in general who are experiencing foster care. Give me 1 second.
You're adopted.
Just adopted me.
Like, so your parents didn't want you. Your mom and dad are not my mom and dad, and they didn't want you. That's why we took you in. We found you in a porch, and they said, listen, they had a note said, this is Talia, and they gave us to her. They gave you us
Why?
because they didn't want you.
Dad.
Is that why you're different? That's why you see there's difference to us. I have a big nose. You have a small nose.
Yeah.
I'm better looking. You're kind of chopped.
You're chopped.
No, you're chopped. Wanna go back to your real parents,
No, I like you.
brothers, sisters?
I like you.
You back? You want to go back? Let's go back.
No, I like you.
I gotta tell you something.
What?
You're adopted.
All right. So who wants to take the first one there? Anyone? I'll start off. I think it's just very easy to see at the beginning of there. Your parents didn't want you, right? And although this is a joke, I think that when we watch these typings, like Hope just says, when these type of videos go viral, like this one has millions of views and 60,000 likes, right? We're affirming that this is okay, right? And then when we actually have these type of experiences with people, we've seen videos like this, or we've been exposed to content like this where we think, oh, it's okay, it's just a joke, right? To say your parents didn't want you to a child, even if you're joking, it's not trauma informed and it's not okay, right? Another quote that he said was, we found you. I think that goes back to identity, when we spoke about identity earlier, and how trauma informed language can be used to help a child's identity or harm a child's identity, right? You find things on the street, right? You can find a quarter on the ground. You don't find children, right? Real parents is another one we're going to go over later today. Every parent is a real parent. So if we're going to specify biological parents compared to adopted parents, we need to use some more trauma-informed language, because real is kind of subjective, because real is what you make and not biology. And the last one is go back. I think that, as in my experience, the threat of being sent back has always been there for me as a former foster youth, even as an adoptee. So these aren't jokes, because these are realizations for a lot of adoptees and foster youth. And I think that that's why these videos go viral, because people know that, hey, this has been said to me, or this has been said to someone that I know. So what are y'all's opinions on that video that we just watched?
My personal view on
Her
it is
appearances.
that
There's kid.
1 second, Ron. I think you might be mobile, so your service is coming in and out. There was someone else speaking first. They want to get back to you, Ron. Hope, was your hand up?
my hand was not up. My apologies on that. What I was going to say is that kind of reinforcing what Ron said as far as the visual aspect, he was kind of just being really rude about, you know, how she looked.
Absolutely. I also wrote that down. That's why we're different, right? He was really highlighting that, and that's something that foster youth also deal with a lot, is being different, right? And him highlighting that difference is not trauma informed. Ron, are you at a better? Wait, did Ron? Oh, Ron dropped us. He might join back in. Alrighty. Ashley, Akira, or Diana, did you guys have any insight on what we just watched?
I mean, I think you mentioned many of the things that I noticed. I think also the fact that, like, she asked, what does that mean? So that means that this is a young girl who doesn't even know what adoption is. And so the explanation that he gave her, like, that's what she's gonna, like, run with, you know, like, until she starts having more experiences and starts learning more information. Like, that's what she's taking away from the conversation, is like, oh, that's what adoption means. And then he put it on the internet.
Yep. Diana, did you have your hand up? If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay, we're gonna move on to I think I have like 2 more videos. Give me one moment. Share, is it this one? Yes. This is the one we're gonna watch next.
Fostering, even though they're auntie. Am I wrong for fighting to adopt children I've been fostering, even though their auntie, who refused to take them in initially, wants custody? My husband and I have been fostering 2 siblings who are 7 and 4 for about 6 months. They came to us after tragically losing both parents in a car crash. We were told they had no immediate family willing to take them in, including their auntie, who was listed on their will as guardian, but declined custody when she was contacted. It was a heartbreaking situation, and the children were extremely traumatized. They clung to each other and barely spoke for weeks, put everything into helping them heal. Therapy, love, patience. Slowly they opened up, they laughed again, started making friends. It's been one of the hardest and most beautiful experiences of our lives. Recently we started the adoption process, and that's when things got more complicated. The same auntie that refused to take them in is now expressing interest in custody, saying she was too emotionally overwhelmed at the time to fulfill her sister's wishes. I won't lie, I'm livid. Where was this energy when the kids were alone, scared, and sleeping in a stranger's house? She had every chance to be there when it mattered, but now she wants to show up when the hard part is over. Now it's down to the courts. Am I wrong for fighting? Am I wrong for fighting?
All right, what do we think? Is she wrong for fighting? What are some non-trauma informed things that she said, and what's some things that she ignored about the children and their families?
I can go first. First, I just think that I know that we've talked about this in different ways. You know, just my first thought is that would be really hard if I was one of the kids that she was speaking of, and watching that and being like, why didn't my auntie want me at first? And then only like noting her perspective, like, to me, that's annoying that you were overwhelmed. compared to like validating that, it would be overwhelming that your sister, just passed and then she has 2 kids to take care of. So very just like only seeing her experience that is like anger and not the other perspectives of the scenario.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else?
I wonder about that language of like she refused to take them and how accurate that might be. Grief, especially like such an unexpected loss like that, that's so traumatic. And, I just wonder like, did she actually like refuse to take them, or did she kind of did she have hesitations? Was she overwhelmed? Was she dealing with her own trauma and losing her sister? That's a very strong word to say without much more context.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The one thing that I'm not a big fan of in this video is I know it was previously touched on is the digital footprint aspect to it. At some point or another, the kids will be able to go back and see this. And to me, it doesn't seem exactly fair as far as the commodification of their, trauma and their experiences. But more so than that, I don't think it's exactly fair to the family dynamics at play as far as like potential individuals within the foster care and adoptive settings kind of being utilized against them and the trauma that they've experienced. And again, just eliminating people from support methods and individuals that could potentially be supportive of, a reunification in this capacity.
Absolutely.
I think I also wonder like, did the foster parents like offer support to the aunt, and like, I don't know, maybe I'm getting a little bit beyond language, but like offering support to the aunt, like, okay, well, if you don't feel prepared to take them now, like, how can we have foster a relationship with you guys and like offer you support so that you can still be a part of their life and things like that.
No, exactly. And that's actually what I was going to highlight. One thing that I noticed off rip was the aunt ignoring death, right? And implying, like, oh, the aunt literally said, hey, I wasn't in a good space. Like, my sister just died. Like, can you just watch her children for a little bit and offer support, right? And that goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the course, saying, like, what is trauma informed language, right? And that will directly highlight respect, speaking to the child as a whole person, not just as a case or their behavior, right? So that means respecting that their mother just died, respecting their aunt, and promoting safety, saying, hey, you can stay safely here and we'll prepare you to go back home when your aunt is ready. I think it's not okay for foster or adoptive parents to, quote, fight, right? I think her first word is, am I wrong for fighting, right?
Yeah.
If you are fighting and that child has a safe placement, yes, you're wrong for that. And that language, right, that self-fight is, that's an aggression word, right?
Yeah.
Fight means to harm, right? So automatically you're asking, is it wrong for me to harm this family? Yes, right? Because you're not fighting for them, you're fighting against them. So I think it directly goes back into, promoting safety and respecting the child as a whole human, not only just the child, but the entire family. So I did have some more videos I did want to go through, but I do want to move on forward with the course. I will put these links in the follow-up email. There's just 2 more TikTok videos that are kind of long, but they also are really, really insightful. So I'm going to put those in the links for us to share later on after the course. So let's get back to the course itself. So when we are speaking about being trauma informed, let me go ahead and hide you guys into the next thing. Also, a few of y'all dropped. I see that you guys are still here in the audience. I don't know how to get you back up top, but if you're here, you can definitely leave your questions in the chat section. So I know that Diana might be here, Ron might be here. You guys might have lost access to be on the panel, but you can definitely still leave questions in the chat. Alrighty, so speaking about being trauma informed, what does that mean? So we're going back to what that means, and the next thing we're going to go over is why does it matter, right? So we went over what is trauma informed language. So now we want to say, like, what does that mean? There's this acronym that I use. It's called Richer, right? Like richer language, right? And when you use richer language, you see the child wholly, not just their story, right? When you use richer language with a child, you avoid blame, you avoid shame, you avoid labels, right? You're not going to shame a child into, you know, being their behavior or calling them a rat child. You're not going to call them a rat child, right? You're not going to call them problematic. You're not going to call them their behaviors. When you use richer language, it means that you are supporting safety, you're supporting trust, you're also supporting belonging, right? We want children to feel belonged in your home. That's why you offer external childcare. We don't want children to feel othered. A lot of the times I hear parents say, I'm going to love all my kids the same. You cannot love all your children the same, especially children that you adopt or that you foster or who have experienced external childcare, because they've had a different experience, right? When you use richer language, it means that you are honoring a young person's voice, their identity, and their lived experience. You're not going to try to erase their lived experience. You're not going to try to erase their previous family. So these are all things that you can do when you use richer language. So what is richer language, right? Trauma-informed language is a richer trauma-informed language is a way to speaking to and about foster children, right? Especially those impacted. So this is going to go back to the beginning of our whole course, is hammering in richer language. So the R stands for respect, right? So when we're using trauma-informed language, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to respect, speaking to the child as a whole person, not just their case or behavior. The I is identity, right? You're going to affirm the children's identity, honoring how a child sees themselves, whether they be trans, queer, straight, whatever they identify sexually, including their race, their culture, their gender, and their family. Family's huge, right? The C stands for curiosity over judgment. I think somebody asked that earlier. Assuming, right? Part of being trauma informed is not to assume. When you see a child as a whole person, not their fake case or not their behavior, you're seeing them as an entire person. So instead of saying, oh, this child's a bad child because I read about it in their file, or this child is a bad child because they speak disrespectfully, right? You're going to really pick at your curiosity over judgment, and you're going to ask, right? Ask questions, ask their birth parents, ask the child, right? What they need from you instead of assuming. And I think a lot of the times is people don't respect children and their boundaries or their needs. A lot of children will tell you exactly what they need. And a lot of parents try to guesstimate, right? Because they feel like that's what the child needs. But a lot of times they just need you to ask. The H stands for healing, right? Framing experience in a way that validate pain without defining a child by it. So I think the H is really, really important, because I think we see a lot of foster youth and adoptees that become adults who are not healed, right? Part of healing is, yes, this happened to you. Yes, it was shitty, but you also have a present of life. That's why it's called the present. It's a gift, right? And everyone after 18 has a choice. I was actually speaking to my aunt. She's the matriarch of my family. And she said that a lot of the times children in foster care, she calls it the bird theory. She goes, a lot of times parents who keep their children, kept children, right? They parent like humans. And they'll keep this child and they'll nourish this child and nurture this child and make sure that they're, set for college. And even after college, they have a room. And after they're staying on their insurance until 25, all the benefits that, the perfect parent would give to their child. She said children who experience foster care adoption, she says that our experience are more like birds. And she says, yes, you get cared for. Yeah, foster care is like the nest. Adoption's kind of like the nest. And, the mama bird is the foster adoptive parent. And her job is just to sit on this egg and care for this egg until they hatch. And then while you're a baby, she'll feed you, right? And then after a while, you got to get out the nest. And instead of gently guiding, offering supports, offering safety nets, right? You just get kicked out of the nest. And that's why, I don't know if you guys ever seen little baby birds dead on the sidewalk under a tree. It's because some of them flew and some of them failed because there was no safety nets. There was nothing to catch them. So when you're in foster care and you're expected to heal through all of the trauma, and then at 18, you're just kicked out on your own, or even at a lot of adoptees at 18, they're just kicked out on their own, right? How is that setting up a frame? How is that setting up a framework for them to actually heal validly, right? Express their pain and also not die emotionally, physically, financially, or literally, right? When we look at the statistics of children. So healing is really, really important to validate children's pain and to also make sure that they know that they're okay. But part of healing is also offering support and safety nets. You can't heal by yourself. Sure, you can. If you cut your leg open, eventually it'll heal. Our body self heals. But you also, if you don't have any support, any safety nets, any bandages, you are susceptible to gangrene. You're susceptible to infection. That small cut could end up having your leg amputated. So it's really important for us to make sure that children understand that it's okay to heal, it's okay to validate your experience, but know that it does not define you. You can be the little bird that can fly. You do not have to be the bird that falls to the ground and dies. You can be that person, and you can get through what you've been through, right? You got to go through it to get through it. That's just what I think, right? So the E, speaking of that, right, is empowering, right? Using words that build agency rather than reinforce powerlessness. A lot of folks will say, well, Carlos, you seem very pompous, or you seem very confident in yourself. You're damn skippy. I am, because I had to do that before I had the confidence of actually knowing who I was. I had to fake it till I made it. And that's just in general in life. But when you actually use trauma-informed language, even with yourself, when you are manifesting, when you speak positively to yourself, that's empowering. So when we are speaking to these children and saying, hey, some of y'all might fall, some of y'all might fly as birdies, we can be real, and we can also still empower them and say, but it's up to you. Unlike a little baby bird who doesn't know how to fly, we have the statistics to avoid. We have certain programs and agencies that have aging out programs, right? We have educators like myself and platforms like mine that teach you how to be financially literate. So it's not just you falling. We want to also acknowledge their pain so they can validate it and they can heal, but we also want to empower them to know that they don't have to be their story, right? And part of that is using words. Words are really, really powerful. I think a lot of folks, even just in general, don't offer affirming words to a lot of children and folks in general. And then the last point is going to be R, right? Reframe. So reframing language as a tool for connection, not just communication, shifting the way that we think and speak. So instead of saying, oh, I understand, you don't understand, right? I hear that a lot, right? When adoptive parent or foster parents try to use language for a connection or for communication, not a connection, right? Oh, your child comes up to you and says, I was in 37 homes. Oh, that's awful. I can understand that, or I can't understand that, right? I didn't ask you to try to understand, right? I'm trying to connect with you. So when you're trying to connect with a child using language, instead of saying, oh, I understand, or I couldn't imagine, you can go back to what I said earlier, curiosity over judgment. Ask questions instead of assuming. Instead of saying, oh my God, I can't imagine. You can say, wow, can you describe that if you're comfortable? I want to be able to imagine. I want to be able to understand. I want to hear your experience. That's offering empowerment. That's reframing, right? Your language as a tool to empower, right? This is where there's richer. And I want you guys to remember richer. Respect, identity, curiosity, healing, empowerment, and reframe, right? You can always use language to do this, right? When we use richer language, we just don't avoid harm. We create growth and more room for it, right? And connection and truth. When you are respecting children, they're as a whole person, not just as their behavior or their case, when you are affirming their identity, whatever that identity might be, when you ask questions, when you get curious, when you support healing, but also validate their pain, you empower them to do better, but also know that they don't have to feel powerless. They can make a change. And you can reframe all of this by using positive language. And we're going to go over some of this. So in practice, trauma-informed language helps foster and adoptive parents, or foster youth, feel seen, feel safe, and feel valued. It's not about being overly careful, right? I want you guys to understand. Hold on a second. We got a person coming in a little late here. Hi, Asia. How are you? We're going to go ahead and mute you really quickly, but we are going to invite you guys in to do a, a little question, because we have a few more discussions here. All right. So as I was saying, it's not about being overly careful. It's about being intentional and intentionally kind with our words, because language can either be a barrier or it could be a bridge to healing. Language is really, 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 really very important. right? So now that we know the acronym of Richard, let's go over why using trauma-informed language matters. So the importance of trauma-informed language, okay? So for youth who have experienced foster care, adoption, or childhood trauma, the words used by adults can either be a supporting, healing, or reinforce harm. So your language does a lot. Trauma-informed language is important because, one, it builds safety and trust, right? Many foster and adoptive youth have experienced betrayal, loss, harm, lies, deception, just blatant disrespect from adults. Using respectful, non-judgmental language helps create safer environments where they can begin to build trust. Like, remember, it is not the job of the child to trust and respect you. It is your job to use trauma-informed language and trauma-informed care to help them build that trust with you, right? 2, it protects identity and dignity. Words like abandoned, damaged, or failed adoptions can intentionally dehumanize and shame a child. Trauma-informed language uplifts their identity and it celebrates their resilience and avoids defining them by their past. Like I said earlier when we were going over Richard, right? We want to enforce and encourage healing, but that means that we have to inspire them and we need to validate their past, but make sure that we use trauma-informed language that also protects their identity and we don't make their trauma their identity. I think a lot of folks are out here making their trauma their identity because they just weren't encouraged by people to understand that you don't have to be what you've been through. I think if you have some elders in your life, I think you might have heard that quote, right? You don't have to be what you've been through and you don't have to look like what you've been through. All right, another thing that it does is it protects identity and dignity. Oh, we already went over that one. The other one is foster connections and belonging. When children hear the language that is curious, caring, and affirming, they feel seen. So when you ask questions, have you ever had a person really, even like a date or a person that you just met, and they ask you a bunch of questions, and they're not like invalidating questions or like intrusive questions. They're just really interested in getting to know you. It makes you feel seen. And especially for foster and adopted youth, when you ask questions about their experience, they feel seen, but not as a case or a problem, right? Being seen as a full, worthy person, this strengthens the attachment and the communication and the emotional safety that child will feel with you. Models respect and behavior. So once again, we're going over why trauma-informed language matters and what you can do and why it matters, right? So adults set the tone. Even though we are trauma-informed and child-centered, we are the models, right? When caregivers and professionals speak in trauma-informed ways, they model how to speak to others with empathy and care, teaching youth that they deserve respect in all relationships. If the first people, there's this quote that I hear all the time, usually in a child's life, their first bully is who? Their parents, right? Their parents are their first bullies, right? Or their caregivers are their first bullies. A lot of children will say, well, the first time I heard someone be mean to me, or the first time I felt, like we said earlier in our conversations when we opened up the course and we did our opening reflection, I asked you, name a time where you didn't feel heard or seen, right? Name a time when you felt small. A large percentage of you guys were talking about your caregivers. Your caregivers did that to you. It was not another stranger on the street. It was the people who are supposed to be there to protect you, right? To keep you safe, to make sure that you felt like you belonged, right? So when we speak in trauma-informed ways, we model how they will actually let other people speak to them, and we encourage boundaries, right? And respect within relationships. Using trauma-informed language reduces re-traumatization. So even when you are being well-meaning, you can re-trigger traumatic memories. People do it to me all the time where they're just being very, very well-meaning. Or a lot of it for me, I'll be personal here, is with breast and chest feeding. Yes, I support women breast and chest feeding or parents. But for me, if you know my story, there's a lot of trauma there. So when I am in a space or in a conversation surrounding that and people are like, well, fed is best. And I'm just like, no, it ain't. Depending on the age, okay, right? And if you know my story, you know why I'm saying that. It can trigger memories with feeling powerlessness, right? A trauma-informed approach minimizes emotional harm by being intentional and reflective of our words. So even online, we have to do that, and you can when you're having these conversations, right? So I'm going to unmute everyone really quickly. Hold on, let me make sure I'm on the right spot here. Yes, 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 yes. So I'm gonna unmute everyone and show everyone, and then we're gonna go over a quick 5-minute activity. Uh-oh, I don't know why. Maybe it did work. There we go. Alrighty, perfect. So we're gonna go over a quick activity. And then you guys can all just kind of add in when you want to, okay? So, what phrases in this field, right, have we heard that is not trauma informed or that didn't sit right with you and why? So just a quick phrase like crack baby or like whatever you've heard recently. Name one phrase. I want each of you guys to name one phrase um, that you've heard recently and why they didn't quite sit right with you. Anyone can go first.
I can go first. As a therapist, I get parents who bring kids to me all the time and say, fix them. And it doesn't sit with me because generally, behaviors are needs and it's not fixing the child, it's fixing the surroundings. And it's generally the child doesn't need fixed, they need their needs met.
Fix them is horrible. All right, got that down. Anyone else?
I think one that we've mentioned today or we've heard today is just this idea of like they're not my real parents, or like just not being more specific when talking about the different parental figures that are in a person's life. And I'm sorry, my child is being really loud.
No, you're okay. You're okay. It's Saturday. It's Saturday. So, alrighty. Anyone else? Alrighty. If not, so we have fix them, and then the last guest, but the last guest is shared with us. So we're gonna go move on to why. So anybody wait? Does somebody have something to add? I want to squeeze over you guys. We are doing good on time. We got about an hour left, 45 minutes really, because we have a 15-minute discussion afterwards. Alrighty, so I'm going to go back and hide you guys back down. I do like that feature. Hide. I'm still getting used to this platform as a webinar series. I usually just do one-on-one, but I do like the functionality here. All right, so we went over why trauma-informed is important. So now we're going to go over how to use trauma-informed language, right? Sorry. Here it is. Too much paperwork. So how to use trauma-informed language. So when using trauma-informed language with foster youth and adoptees, it's important to lead with curiosities, not assumption. Ask open-ended questions and let the child define their own stories in their own words, right? My story. It's my story to share. You should let me share it in my words. It goes back to the book I just wrote. Ask open-ended questions. Like I said, ask open-ended questions, let them define their story. Use people first and identifying and affirming language. So people first and identifying and affirming language is saying a child in care instead of foster kid. We want to place the person first. So we can use that in a lot of different ways, right? So instead of saying disabled person, you can change that to person with disabilities or person with different abilities, right? Or so you're gonna put the personhood before the trauma or before the marginalization, right? This even goes back to when people say gay people, like, oh, those are gay people. Well, why do we just identify them as their sexuality? Why can't they just be people who are queer, right? Or people who happen to be gay? I don't know. But we want to really, when we're talking about trauma-informed language, we want to use people first language. And if you've done any trainings, I'm sure you've learned about using people first language. And this is important because it shows respect to who they are beyond their circumstances. So we can all do better at being mindful of the words that we carry, that can carry shame, that we use, that can carry shame or emotional weight. We're going to go over some things that we can avoid. Avoid using terms like real parents, right? Abandoned, failed placement, failed adoptions, and choose supportive language that centers the dignity and safety. These small shifts can affect how the child feels about themselves how they feel seen, and how they feel supported, just simply how we speak to them, right? Ooh, oh Lord, there we go. Go to the next slide. All right. So some words, right? Some words to avoid and alternatives to use. Some words on the screen are some words that I like: blessed, success, you got this, kindness, powerful, fearless, inspire, right? So there are some words that we can use or we should not use, and there's some words that we can use some alternatives. I went over a few of them on my video if you guys watched that, right? So why is it important to use these alternatives? Because we want to ask, we don't want to assume, we want to use identifying affirming language, and we want to avoid triggering terms. And some of these triggering terms are very, very triggering, right? So for example, crack baby. My foster child was a crack baby. You probably shouldn't be saying that, but the amount of times that I hear that on a daily basis, especially online, right? Or they'll try to sweeten it up. They'll be like, oh, they were born addicted. Okay, you didn't use crack, but once again, you're dehumanizing, you're oversharing, right? And you're using issue first, not person first language, right? So remember, when we're being trauma informed, we want to use person first language, right? So instead of saying my child was a crack baby, the infant was exposed to has prenatal exposure to substances, right? But always start with the person first. Infant with prenatal substance exposure. I said the same thing as crack baby. I just put a person first. I put the child first, right? And even that, it depends on who the fuck you're talking to. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to be professional. It depends on who you're talking to, right? Infant with prenatal substance exposure, you shouldn't probably just be saying that to your next door neighbor because that's none of their business, right? But if you're speaking to therapists, doctors, social workers, that's the language you're going to want to use. The reason why we don't use crack babies is because it dehumanizes a child by reducing them to a substance or a stereotype, right? It reinforces racist and classist narratives from the 80s and 90s, right? To be honest, a lot of white babies, people aren't calling white babies crack babies, right? It gives has a very racial undertone, and it contributes to feelings of shame, marginalization, and lifelong stigma. To this day, people call me a crack baby. People call my husband a crack baby because we were born with prenatal substance exposure. And it also, when people kind of align that with you, it also allows them to assume things about you, assume things about your education, assume things about your intelligence, right? Instead of asking questions, right? And we're going to keep going over the same things that we've kind of been hinting on during this whole course, right? Another phrase that you want to avoid is real parents. Those are your real parents versus biological birth parents, right? What this does is when you say real parents, it validates other parents, right? Real parents. So I'm the real parents, not the birth parents. Well, the birth parents are the real parents. So are you just going to invalidate that they gave birth to a child? It suggests that the adoptive or foster or kinship parents are somehow less real or less legitimate, or vice versa. So when you ask an adoptee, are these your real parents? That adoptee might be like, yeah, these are my real parents. Because to them, real is subjective. This is why we need to use trauma-informed language like biological, right? Or birth, right? Because to an adoptee, that family might be their real parents. But in my case, they weren't my real parents. They didn't treat me like my real parents, and I knew who my real parents were. So when people ask me, are these your real parents? I had to say no. Like, no, these are my adopted parents, right? And that just really just put me, it's my second point. It put me in a place of feeling othered, and it invalidated my identity. It can cause confusion and shame, and implying their family situation is less valid, and especially with transracial adoptions. I already look different, right? So now I feel different, I look different. People are trying to, and I got asked that a lot because I was a transracial adoptee. Are you a foster child? Are these your real is these your real parents? Is this your real mother? And sometimes I say, yeah, this is my real mom. And people will even laugh at that because I even tried that out for a little bit. And they're like, oh, there's no way that's your real mom. You're not mixed, right? And there's a whole great thing going back to my identity, right? When you say real parent, it centers biology over relationships. It focuses on blood ties instead of love, care, and bonds that actually build family. So adoptive parents can be real parents to adoptees. I know a lot of adoptees or even foster youth who say, these are my real parents. That's up to the child to choose. It's not up for us adults. It's not for us adult adoptees. It's not for us educators to say, well, those are your biological parents and those are your adoptive parents. So you can't use the word real parents with your adoptive parents. Yes, they can. Because remember, we're going to center the child and their trauma and their needs. And if that adoptee or that foster youth want to call their caregiver their real parents and want to identify their biological family as their first family or their biological family or birth family, that's up to them, right? Also, my aunt told me this too. My blood aunt. Blood doesn't make you family. Blood just makes you related, right? So we don't really want to center biology in relationships over blood ties when we're using language. We just want to center what the child wants. Some children want to center their blood. I want to always center my blood. My family will always be my family. Some kids don't want that. But if you actually ask questions and don't assume, you will know what you will need to do for your child and what type of language you should be using with them, okay? The next one is given up for adoption. My child was given up for adoption. What can we say instead? Place for adoption, relinquished, adopted as an infant, experience an adoption plan. So why don't we want to say given up? Given up implies that it was cheap, right? It implies that the child was unwanted, it was discarded, they were surrendered like property. You give up things to the Goodwill, right? You give up bad habits, right? You don't give up children. It frames the birth parents as decision as careless or casual when it's often complex, painful, and or influenced by systemic barriers. Now, we all know the systemic barriers as far as coercion, poverty, youth, assault being large players in private adoption and parents making that decision. But when you say, oh, well, their parents gave them up, that actually makes the birth parents feel and see like we're assuming, once again, we're assuming that these people weren't experiencing any type of barriers or hardships, right? When we say placed is very intentional. Like when I gave up this cup, girl, did you throw it up? Did you just throw it out there? No, I placed this. When we use language like place, it means that we are putting something with care. We're being intentional and we're placing it for adoption, right? And when I'm doing these courses, I know that there's some adoptees that don't even like the word place. But once again, like I said at the beginning of the course, I'm not here to say if adoption is good or bad or negative or positive. That's for me on the platform. In these courses, I'm just here to offer additional support and resources for language that adoptive parents and foster parents can use now. So if any of these words don't work out with you or your child, like I said, ask them, right? So when you use given up, it also reinforces a powerlessness and an objective-based view of the adoptee, someone who was given away rather than being a person that experienced loss or a person that was intentionally placed, right? Private adoption is the #1 form of adoption in America, and I don't think that that's people giving children up. It's a very well organized system where there are families and baby brokers and people and contracts and discussions. So I don't think that that's given up. That was very intentional. Money's exchanged. So these parents didn't give up. They were placed, right, for adoption for what other reasons that might be, right? Taken away / put in foster care. The kid was taken from those real parents. We got a double whammy here, right? How many times have I heard, oh, you were taken away from your real parents, right? Versus entered foster care for safety or experienced child welfare intervention, right? When you use the word taken away or put in foster care, it can feel violent or traumatic because taken, once again, that language means to remove. When something is taken from you, it's usually removed without permission, removed with force. So the phrase suggests force and danger, which can re-trigger fear for children, okay? It blames the system or the child. It implies that a sudden act without context rather than a safety decision made to protect a child. Once again, I know there's a lot of folks who follow me who are anti-CPS. I too have a lot of issues with CPS. But working in this system and working alongside this system and working with children and other advocates and other professionals, there are cases where children literally ask for safety. Once again, we need to center the child and ask them, don't assume. So when we say, oh, they were taken away, some kids are like, I wasn't taken away. I called. I've talked to kids that say, oh no, I wasn't taken away. I entered foster care for my safety. Once again, we got to ask them, what is their story? Because if you ask me, I was taken away, but I was placed in foster care for my safety. If you read my books, I was like, woo, man, at least I don't have to worry about, that stuff happening back at home. Although I did end up even in more abuse in foster care. But the language that we can use is really important. Saying taken away or put in foster care, it erases the reasons for intervention. It leaves out the focus on safety, care, and the child's well being and the removal process. Once you highlight the system instead of highlighting children, I think a lot of the times, even people who are advocates or people who watch me, we spend so much time on the system, the system, the system. Yes, the system needs change, but for us to change the system, we need to ensure that we're also guiding these kids that are currently in the system or who have experienced the system, that we're using the correct language, right? And we're not invalidating some of them, right? The number one removal for foster care right now, I believe, is neglect, which is a fancy word for poverty. But then the second one is abuse. So we need to, once again, I'm going to keep saying it, ask questions and don't assume, right? And we need to use first person affirming language. So, speaking of first person affirming language, unwanted child. So the first word in this sentence is unwanted. So that's going to be the highlight, right? So what should we do with all the unwanted children? Remember, we're going to use people first language. So whenever you're responding, anything that's trauma informed language will always be people first. So what should we do with all the unwanted children? Let's switch that up. What should we do with children awaiting permanency or a child in need of a safe external care? Right? Do you see how in the pink, what should we do with all the unwanted children? Children are the last thing in the sentence, right? On the blue, a child is first. Their experience is second, right? Because we want to humanize them. It labels, so when you use phrases like unwanted child, it labels the child instead of the situation. It suggests that their worth is somehow tied to whether they are wanted or not, right? And then in their inherent value, right? So when you say something's unwanted, well, every child is actually wanted. Now, there might be reasons of why they need safe external care, but just because a parent can't care for them doesn't mean that they weren't wanted. It reinforces shame and rejection, and it can deepen the feelings of abandonment and low self-esteem, right? And a lot of adoptive parents make this mistake. I know mine did, where she goes, well, why do you care so much about your birth parents? They didn't want you. Well, they wanted me, but you can switch that and say, hey, can you help me understand how you care so much for people that didn't show as much consistency or something? Rephrase it once again to a question and ask instead of making assumptions, because my response would have been, well, yeah, I know my mom made a lot of mistakes, but I still love her no matter what. That would have been my response. And as my parent, she could have received that, been trauma informed and guided me through that. And then instead of what she did, which is saying unwanted child, it ignores the systemic and circumstantial factors. So once again, it's not learning my story, it's not learning my parents' story, it's not humanizing me, it's not using richer language. I was in foster care because my mother was a young child who was a mother of 4 children. She was in foster care herself. It was generational trauma. And had my adoptive parents asked her, because they had access to my birth mother, they just refused to kind of take that access because they once again assumed that she was so dangerous. Because even for her, and I think that this happens to a lot of parents too, for birth parents, they become their files. And maybe they said some unnice things to a couple social workers, or maybe they were aggressive at their shelter hearing, or aggressive, as if any person's going to be happy with their children getting removed, right? But birth parents also often become their file. And a lot of adoptive and foster parents and social workers, and even therapists, will treat them as their file instead of looking at the systemic and circumstantial factors and overlooking why the placements needs were needed in the first place, and understanding that these can be complex situations and it's not depending on the child's worth and if they're wanted or not. Okay. All right. I got somebody in the chat here. What does that say? Okay, perfect. Forever Family, one of my favorites. Not Forever Family. We became her forever family after 3 years of fostering. Now the pink, some adoptive parents are like, what's wrong with saying that? Right? Forever family? Like, that's what they wanted. It's very positive, right? Versus adopted family. Adopted family does a couple things. I prefer adopted family because it ties the legality. Because forever, adoption is not always forever. Rehoming exists. A lot of children who are adopted, especially queer children, experience abandonment. And this idea of forever, nothing's forever. The only thing that is forever is death, okay? So we can really using trauma-informed language is actually using the the real terms, right? And not using rose flowery language. Like I said earlier, using trauma-informed language doesn't mean that you tiptoe around what's in front of you or the facts, right? So we're not going to say, oh, this is your forever family, this is your adopted family, right? Why do we say this? Because one, it feels performative. It feels like marketing. It's like a ploy. It's very inauthentic, especially to children who have experienced disruption. Imagine me at 8, 9 years old and meeting my adopted family, and these people keep telling me these are your forever family. Bitch, y'all said that 37 times ago. You said that this was going to be stable. You said that I would find someone, especially for adoptees who've had, quote, a failed adoption, right? Or adoptees who've been rehomed. That just doesn't exist. So how many forever families am I supposed to have? And that also ignores the fact that my first family, my birth family, was supposed to be my forever family, right? So now you're going to be my forever family? It doesn't make sense. This phrase originated in animal rescue, where pets are placed in forever homes. Using the same language for children as pets is dehumanizing. Y'all know how I feel about language, and y'all know how I feel about the history between the ASPCA and adoption and foster care. If you don't know the history, I highly encourage you to go look up Henry Berg. He is the founder of the ASPCA, what he did for animals as well as children, and why we have so many similar words. But this idea comes from the ASPCA. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that it centers the adoptive parents' feelings of rescue rather than the child's complex journey of loss, grief, and identity. I was going to say, it reminds me when people say forever family for pets. Yes, right? Or gotcha days. Gotcha days also started in pet adoption. We have now transferred that to adoption itself, right? And what it does, like I said, it ignores the child's complex journey, right? Adoption, when you say adopted family, that confirms that, like, hey, you had a journey to get here, and there was a legal act of adoption that made you our family. It's okay to say that, right? But this flower language of, like, this is your forever family. Well, I had to go through a lot to get here. I lost a couple families to get here, right? So let's just use trauma-informed language, and part of using trauma-informed language is just being real. All right. Going on, addict junkie. Ooh, once again, if you're on my platform, we hear this one a lot. The mother is an addict. Oh, what are we supposed to leave her with, a crackhead, a junkie, right? My foster child's mother was an addict, right? Off rip, I just think that our society doesn't understand the disease of addiction, because it is a medical disease, right? So I start there. Being trauma-informed and using the right language without the history, like I keep saying, won't help you. So learn the history first. But this is not the history course. This is a trauma course. So we're going to stick on the language. Instead of saying my foster child's mother was an addict, you can say my foster child mother was a person living with substance use disorder. Remember, person first, people first language, right? We're going to say she is a person. We're going to affirm her personhood or their personhood. And they're just a person living with a substance use disorder. And I like this phrase, living with, because addiction is a lifelong process, right? You're not going to say she's addicted, right? No, she's a person living with substance disorder or substance use disorder, because it's a long process. And some people have years and years and 30 years of sobriety. And some people relapse several times throughout their lifehood. And that's okay, because they're living with a disorder, a medical disorder. When you use addict or junkie, it reinforces the idea that people who use substances are inherently broken or morally flawed, or if they're just a lost cause for society, right? It dehumanizes and shame. It dehumanizes and shames, and it is rooted in disgust and fear of people who use substances. Listen, I traveled the world. In Amsterdam, everybody's a substance user, in my opinion, right? And also, what does that look like? It's also very subjective. Are marijuana users drug users? I guess it's a drug. Well, then if we're getting that vague, if you take Tylenol, if you take Vicodin, if you take any type of supplement, it's a drug. So I think when we say crack or addict or junkie, we're dehumanizing them, and it's rooted in the disgust of people who use what we consider, category 3 or 4 drugs, right? And one thing that it does also, using phrases like an addict or junkie, it reduces a person to their substance use, which is a medical issue, not a moral one. I will stand on that ground to say substance use is a medical issue, not a moral one. Mind your business, right? And if you want to mind their business, help them out. Don't judge them. Alrighty, so there's a few more. Hold on, before we go, there's a few more that I did not put on the thing, but I do want to go over. Okay, unwanted damage. Okay, so damaged. So instead of using damaged, we're going to use healing from trauma, navigating trauma history. Right. Juvenile delinquent. This is one that specifically professionals in this world of adoption and foster care use. Right. Oh, they're a juvenile delinquent. Well, girl, that sounds that you just called them inmate. They're inmate, right? So instead of saying juvenile delinquent, you can say they are system involved, right? Or youth in the justice system, right? They're not a because delinquent just are automatically, even though I know legally you have to if you're in court, right? But even then, you don't have to. Let's start to change the language in court too, because they're a system involved youth. They're not a juvenile delinquent because if you put everyone, the same child that has 4 felonies, and you label them as a juvenile delinquent, and then you have this one child that just has a bunch of severe trauma and needs to be housed in this facility, and they're both delinquents, now we've just equated them to their behaviors the same, and we have not humanized each of their experiences. So all of this goes back to the language that we're using, right? Another one is failed adoption. It's a disrupted adoption that did not finalize. There are no failed adoptions. So this is also something that is very polarizing in the community when adoptive parents say, I had a failed adoption, or you had a successful reunification. It depends on how you look at it, right? I can also be trauma informed with adoptive parents and say it's a disrupted adoption or an adoption that did not finalize or the adoption plan changed. That's being, empathetic towards adoptive parents. But if you're truly being trauma informed, it's not a failed adoption. That is a reunification. That's a successful reunification. So it really depends on how you look at it. And when you are using trauma informed language, you should once again ask the person, humanize the person, and figure out what they need as an individual, not just as a broad statement for people. All right, so now we have an open discussion for about 5 minutes. All the words that we went over, I have 2 questions. Why are these words harmful? Or from your opinion, I know why I went over them. And what impact could alternative phrasing have on the child? So give me your opinion of why these words are harmful. Maybe some other words that you've heard that we haven't gone over. And then the second question that you can answer is what impact could the alternative phrasing have on a child or family? I'm going to ahead and bring you guys back up here. And whoever wants to go first can go first. Hold on. Also, if you're in the comment section, you can also. Oh, how do I add you back to the session? Uh-oh. Anybody wants to add in, or if you're not in the session with us on the panel anymore, you can also add your things in the comment section too. We can read it there as well. Ashley, did you want to add anything?
I think you pretty much covered it. But I guess something that I like to reiterate a lot is, children can feel when, something doesn't sit right with them. And, just like leaning into, not wanting to hurt people even with our language.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. Hope, Asia, or Kara?
I was kind of curious, right? In my experience involved with the system, right? One of the phrases I used to commonly use was that it fell through, right? Like, so the adoption, it fell through, right? Um, it, I feel like now with your education, right, that's probably not trauma informed. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, because it depends on who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to the adoptive parents, sure, that could be an adoption that quote fell through, but then that's also highlighting the system instead of highlighting the people. So if you're talking to the birth parents, I wouldn't say, oh, the adoption that fell through. Well, girl, yeah, it fell through. It's a fucking hole that it's supposed to fall through. I got my kids back, right? So if we are being person first, it depends on who we're speaking to, right? So we don't want to go to an adoptive parent and be like, oh my gosh, your adoption, congratulations on your successful reunification. That might be traumatizing for them. So we have to stay people first. And when we're using trauma-informed language, it depends on who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a child, I wouldn't say it fell through, right? I would use the other alternatives that we went over, right? It's like adoption, like, hey, your adoption plan changed. right?
Mhm.
Which I like that one because instead of saying fell through, it leaves it open, saying that it changed. And changing means that it could go back, it could go to another family, right? Or that it just wasn't finalized, right? Or it was disrupted. But fell through specifically, when we're using any language, we want to use positive language. So when you fall, nothing's positive about falling, right? So that's that's what I would say to that.
Awesome. Moving forward in the future, I'll definitely be sure to use the word changed instead. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anyone else? Let's see. I got some people in the chats. Let's see. Okay, Kira says children are soaking in everything from adults around them in order to make sense of the world. Language is so powerful. I agree, Akira. I'm 40 years old and I can still recall words that were said to me as a child, painful words. Yeah, Akira, and earlier we went over, that was actually our reflection at the beginning of the course, was reflecting of a time where we were the actual children harmed by words, and how long, like you said, you're 40 years old, and how long that lasting effect has been. I want to go over some other ones that we haven't heard. So can you guys give me 2 or 3 harmful phrases that you've heard that I didn't bring up? And if you're in the chat section, you can also put those in the chat. I will read them. Diana says, asking the children questions is so important because of their voice. It's their story to share. Absolutely, Diana. Absolutely. Hope, Ashley, Asia, Kara, anyone have any 2 or 3 phrases that I didn't cover that you've heard?
Maybe sperm donor.
Ooh, I like that one. We hear that one a lot. Even in birth families, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, your sperm donor. That's like very demeaning.
So why would that be demeaning?
Because sperm donor, that's like, oh, we don't even know who this person is. This is like just a random Joe Blow that, really don't want nothing to do with you.
Absolutely. And what alternative could we use?
I'm struggling with that one. Help me.
All right. So it's okay. So there's actually a whole community. They're called NPEs, non-parent expectant, right? My husband is actually an NPE, which means that either his parent was unknown or he thought he had a different parent. So instead of saying sperm donor, you can say literally unknown, or instead of say, oh, his sperm donor. I think a lot of time when people say sperm donor, they know who the father is. They're just being disrespectful to the father. But if it actually is a child with an unknown father, right? We can say a non-parent expectant, or a child experiencing, let's see, how would I say this on the fly? And this is part of being trauma informed, is to wait and to sit still. So if I were to ask my husband, instead of saying your father is unknown or sperm donor, I think what he would say to me is that his parent, he had a non-parent expect. He didn't expect his father to be his father, so he was just an unexpected parent, an unexpected father, right? Or even if you want to keep it just factual, unknown, that's okay. It's sometimes being trauma informed is just being factual. If you can't find a way to make it, trauma informed on the fly, just stay factual, right? So we're not going to say, sperm donor. Well, yeah, that's technically factual scientifically, but what you're saying is it's unknown. Anyone else have anything to add?
Kind of tying into what I believe Miss Asia said, one I've always heard was the milkman or the mailman was always big ones that were phrases that were thrown around in my house.
The milkman and the mailman, but those are double negatives, because that's one, including that's assuming that the child has an unknown father, right? Or non-expected parent, and that the mother's a cheater, right? Right. So that's a double whammy with those two, right? Sperm donor just implies they just drop some sperm, but the milkman and the mailman implies that some extramarital or extra relationship activity was going on. Anyone else?
Homeless person. I hear a lot.
Homeless person. So homeless person, I actually have some experience with trauma-informed language with that, because first of all, I was a person who experienced homelessness. So you see how I just flipped it? We're going to do trauma-informed person-person language. So homeless person. So we put the situation, we put their trauma, we put their marginalization in front of their personhood. So a homeless person, the way that we could use different language for that is trauma informed, is a person experiencing houselessness, right? Or homelessness. I don't even like the word homeless because you can have a home without having a house. Home is really where you make it. And some people prefer to live outside. Some people prefer to live, in campers or tents. Some people that's their current situation, right? So they may not be homeless, but they may be houseless. And these are people who are experiencing houselessness or people experiencing homelessness, right? And that's a way to once again humanize them, to say they're experiencing this. That doesn't make them a homeless person. They're just experiencing this right now. How's that sound?
Perfect.
And then Diana in the comment section saying, asking children, okay, no, troubled child, I have conversations focusing on highlighting positive experiences. So yes, so exactly, troubled child, once again, places their behavior or their experience before their personhood. So we're going to say a child experiencing adverse responses to trauma, right? A child experiencing a trauma response, right? We're going to not place their behavior or their marginalization before them as human beings. Let's
I
see.
have one more. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry at all. Go ahead, add on.
The new term that I'm hearing, even the kids who, referring to themselves as YN. Oh, that's a YN over there.
So for the white folks who are in the live,
Associate a young, if you calling a child a YN, that is like, that's they got a trend right now, YN versus quarter 3. I think
yeah,
it's the type of jacket, the quarter zip, YN versus quarter zip trend going on right now. And
absolutely.
they're basically, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but YN, if you refer to a child as a YN, that is not good.
Yeah, so YN is slang, usually gang affiliated or hood affiliated, to young nigga. That's what it means. It's an abbreviation for young nigga, right? I actually saw a video as well as white children who are gang affiliated calling themselves YCs, which stands for young crackers, which I felt is hilarious. But once again, if you're going to use trauma informed language, how do I make young nigga trauma informed? Um, First of all, we should be using it for children, but let's say that you a dedicated young man from the hood. I don't know. But once again, some of this language you just probably shouldn't be using, right? And we shouldn't encourage children to use. I wouldn't encourage a child to identify themselves as a YN because, like I said, it does have ties to the street or to gangs or even YCs, right? So yeah, that's something I'm going to highlight that. How do we make young YN trauma informed? I'm going to highlight that and make a video about that. Alrighty, guys. Anyone else?
I have a little bit of an ignorant question, right? And I know, your husband's from Florida, so he may know this term, right? But in Florida, we're always big about calling kids like jits, because they're little, they're running around, right? Is it, I don't know if that's really like appropriate or is that not trauma informed? I'm not really totally sure on that phrase.
So my answer to this question is remember to stay person first. So I don't know what a jit is, like a young jit, right? That's not, I would say any slang that doesn't put the person first is probably not trauma informed. You shouldn't use the children, right? So, yeah, that would be any slang that does not start with first person. So you can say like that, that I don't know. That's another one I'm gonna put on my start list. I don't have one off the top of my head, but I'll have an answer for you in the videos. We got young YN and jit. Okay. Anyone else? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being involved in this interactive group discussion. So I'm gonna drop you guys back down. And then this is going to be the last about 15 minutes of the course, and then we'll have an end discussion for everyone towards the end. So, there we go. Oops. There we go. Perfect. Alrighty. So, with all that being said, what we just went over, are words and phrases that we should avoid while trying to be trauma informed. One thing I do want to highlight is that while we can't change the child's past, we can change the words we use in their presence, right? So when I kept saying ask questions instead of assuming, be person first, be person centered, be child centered, that means to understand them where they've come from, but also, like I said, we can't change their past, but we can use words that reflect their present in a better way, right? So I want to go over some tips with you guys. Oops, I done went back too far. Tips for everyday practice. So how do we use this trauma-informed language that we're learning in this course? How do we use it in everyday practice? Using trauma-informed language in daily interactions means slowing down, right? Even you just saw me, YN, JIT, I didn't know. Instead of saying, I said, hey, I think that we should use first person language, right? Person first language. So if I can't come off the fly with it, I'm just not going to use it, right? If I need to slow down and being intentional with our words. You need to speak with curiosity instead of assumption and allow children and families to define their own experience. Remember that families part? Stop calling birth parents crack parents. Stop calling them unwanted. Stop saying they gave up their child. Listen to them and be intentional. Speak with curiosity instead of assuming they didn't want the parents, right? Let them define their own lived experience. Choose people first and identifying affirming language that recognizes each person's dignity. For example, saying a child in foster care rather than a foster kid. Avoid words that label shame or re-traumatize, and instead frame behaviors as signals of needs of distress. So once we went over, that's not a bad child or a defiant child. It's a child that is experiencing trauma, right? And displaying that trauma. Most importantly, listen to the song here in my heart. No, listen actively and mirror the words that children and families use themselves. So kind of hope to your question, if the mom is saying, yeah, how's my young jit? Mirror that, right? If you get a child in foster care and they say, I'm a YN, I'm saying trauma informed, we're going to educate them on what a YN is, give them some alternatives. But if they want to if they're not harming nobody, if they're not actually on the streets, if they just want to call themselves a YN, let's affirm them. As long as they're not harming people and we give them the education. Because remember, being trauma informed is also knowing the history. So if you give them the education and you say, hey, listen, why do you want to be a YN? Going back to what? Ask questions. Why do you want to be a YN? Do you think that's cool? Like, what is there anything else you would like to be called? Right? Sorry, I lost my place here. Yeah, like I said, choose people first and identifying language that recognizes each person's identity. Listen actively and mirror the children and their families themselves. These small everyday choices in language can build trust, it can strengthen relationships, and it can create a sense of safety and belonging. I know a lot of you guys work with foster and adoptive parents, or even just foster parents if you are in the industry, or the foster and adoption world. Sometimes it feels awkward when you are, especially with transracial adoptions or transracial fostering, to try to mirror their behaviors because you feel inauthentic. But sometimes it goes back to, hey girl, like even that, hey girl, I told my adoptive parents, like I'm working, or even the foster parents I work with, they're like, I'm working with a Black family and she calls me like, hey girl, she calls me sis. Is it okay if I call her that? And I was like, well, ask her. Some Black women will say, no, you cannot call me sis. Some Black women will be like, yeah, you can call me sis. And that will build a relationship, right? That will strengthen the trust that she has with you, right? It goes back to being child and family centered and putting their needs first and listening to them, right? So be mindful, think before you speak, consider the impact of your words, listen actively. Listening is as important as speaking in trauma-informed communication. And apologize when necessary. Acknowledge the mistakes and apologize sincerely, but don't like stay on it. I went through this 2 years ago. I wasn't very trauma-informed with trans-identifying language, right? Even as a gay person, I wasn't well educated in intersex language, trans identity, they, them pronouns. So I found myself getting really frustrated when I was trying my best to, speak to someone and maybe I misgendered them. And then I would make them like, oh my God, I misgendered. No, just say, oh, I apologize, I used the wrong gender. Correct yourself, right? Apologize sincerely and then move the conversation forward. A lot of times when we apologize, we decenter or uncenter the person that we're apologizing, and we center ourselves because we want to make sure that they know we made a mistake. But with doing so, you can also accidentally uncenter them in their needs, right? Especially if you had whatever you're apologizing for. Um, Tips. So let's strive to make trauma-informed language a standard in our interactions, not just professional practice, as a way to truly support healing, dignity, and connection in the lives of children and families. So that means, like I said, for me, it was educating myself on affirmative, trans-affirmative language, gender affirmative language, understanding intersex in that language, right? So we should all strive to be using language and a standard of all of our interactions. We should all be trying to, specifically with children. Now, y'all know me personally. If you don't want to be trauma-informed with adults, that's up to you. We're all adults. We don't have to be. And if you want to be trauma-informed with some adults and not other adults, that's up to you. You should always, always be trauma-informed with all children, no matter their experiences, no matter their backgrounds. You should always, always, always be trauma-informed with these children. So I want to do one last mini reflection before we go into our Q&A and our closing reflection here so we can stay on time. What's one word or phrase that you guys will commit to changing today? So I'm kind of calling y'all out. What's one thing that you have said? I think, Hope, you already said it, like JIT was one, right? What's one thing that you maybe have said in the future or in the past, and or you've caught yourself saying that we highlighted today that you're really going to change and work on in the future? I'm going to unmute or unhide you guys so you can share that. And then we're going to wrap up here shortly. Whoever wants to go first can go first. And then also I'll read your guys' questions in the comments or your responses in the comments. Kira's not letting me let you back into the section. All right, who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I feel like for me, definitely the word JIT is probably what I'm gonna switch up on. While we were speaking on this call, I was trying to look into the origins of it to get a better nuanced understanding. I use that term quite a bit for my nieces and nephews and vice versa. And I was looking into the origins, and there's a little bit of a questionable origin around it. Particularly, one of the websites that I pulled up, it was saying something along the lines of, I believe, juvenile. I believe the exact phrase being used was like a juvenile in training. Apparently it has some history as far as involvement with the prison system, but then there's other references saying that it's referenced for like a jitterbug. A lot of the kids in my life are ADD or ADHD, and I just don't think that's really sensitive to them, so that's probably going to be the big one that I change moving forward in the future.
I love that. I love that. And I love how you went back to the history and educated yourself on the history of that. That's what that starts with. Who's next? Ashley, Asia, Akira, anyone?
I can go. I think that I probably used like foster kid and I will definitely, I think that's just because sometimes I'm trying to like focus so hard and get the words out and like stammer. So I will definitely work on the person-focused language of a child experiencing foster care.
Perfect. And remember, with using trauma-informed language, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to slow down, because if you're really being trauma-informed, that means being intentional, remember? So instead of saying foster kid, a child in foster care, even in your documents, right? I, as a person, like sometimes I still say foster kid, right? Even as a person who's trauma-informed, use trauma-informed language, and I experience it myself. But sometimes when I'm being intentional, I will say a child experiencing care or a child experiencing foster care, right? Rather than a foster kid, because I do really want to place the person first. And using person first language is really important. Asia, did you want to add what's a piece of trauma-informed or a piece of language that you're committing to change today?
I'm not gonna call I'm not gonna say fiend, like, oh, she fiending or fiend out, because that is derogatory. I have, kids who suffer from addictions just because of their circumstances. And it's not right to say, oh, they're fiend out or anything like that. So I will be more sensitive to their um and say a person struggling with addiction. I think
I love,
maybe
I love
that's
that.
yeah,
Putting the people first. I love that.
right,
How
yeah,
you highlight it when you say like, oh, that person was a fiend. If your child was born with a substance disorder, then that means that, am I a fiend too? Right?
right, right, yeah,
Children are sponges, they pick up on these things. So when your children see you honoring and humanizing people struggling with substance abuse, that's going to make them a better person. So they're going to replicate that behavior. And then especially if they know that that's their biological experience, that's going to make them feel better, right? That's going to make them say like,
right,
mom treats other people, that's how mom treats me,
uh-huh.
so I love that. Diana in the comments says that she's going to commit to change the phrase place for adoption, being intentional with trauma, being trauma informed. So she's going to use the word place instead of giving up for adoption. So we love that. We love that. We love that. Anyone else want to add anything before we move on to the closing reflection?
I do have a question. Would you be able to kind of guide us as far as the best way to ask those questions for people that have that lived experience within the system, right? Can you give us some examples on ways to kind of ask them how they prefer to, how they prefer to kind of navigate that conversation of like terminology that they're comfortable with? Because a lot of the concerns that I have is like, while, yeah, to a certain extent, right? They may have a vocabulary that they're comfortable with as being referred to. It doesn't necessarily mean as being the adult in the situation that it may be appropriate to be able to reflect the same thing back to them. Uh, I still kind of want to be, if you will, a leader in the conversation as far as giving them proper vocabulary and words, right? But I also don't want to ask that question and kind of make it too formal and just kind of be, I guess, out of pocket as far as how you're dealing with the kids in those scenarios.
Yeah, so my answer to that would be first of all, kind of know your audience. I think that that's very important. So if you're asking a child or even an older adult, like first of all, start with being inquisitive, saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for being curious, and if you don't mind." So always start with asking them if they mind or not. So because some people, sometimes I'll say, "Hey, I don't mind." Sometimes I do mind. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like I don't want to explain it to you. So when you staying person first, hey, I'm curious about something. Do you mind answering, or do you have the emotional spoons, right? Do you have the emotional availability to answer this for me? If they say yes, then say hey. And then also, like you just said, if any point, and I do this a lot, even professionally and personally, where I will preempt my questions with, if anything I'm about to ask or say makes you uncomfortable, please let me know now, and we can just change the subject, or it doesn't have you don't have to answer it, right? I think that is placing the child in a place of power. You're in control of this conversation. So my biggest advice to that is, when you're trying to be inquisitive to children and their experiences, place them in the place of power, instead of you being, a judge or in a jury or a questionnaire, right? Say, hey, you're in control of anything that you share. And then that way, once again, it's going to build trust. It's going to build that connection with you. And then even if they say no, you can say, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And if you ever feel comfortable, sharing that, I'm always ears for you. So I think my answer to that is to do your best to place them in the position of the power in that conversation, instead of being in the position of power questioning
Okay, cool. Thank you.
them. Hi, Akira. How are you? Uh,
I'm good.
I didn't get to ask you. I think you were watching though. Were you watching this whole time? Or
Yeah, I think I was having some technical issues. So I just like left and then came back. So
Perfect. So we were doing a mini reflection, and we were asking, what's one word or phrase that you'll commit to changing after today? So it could be something that we went over, or just something that that, hey, maybe I wasn't being too trauma informed with that language. What's one word or phrase that you'll commit to changing after today?
yeah, mine is the same. I typed it in, but I don't know if you saw it. the same as somebody else said, like giving up for adoption. I think that's a phrase that I've not thought much about until today. And so, yeah, that's probably the one that really sticks out for me.
Giving up. I love that. And it's such, and like I said, that one, it seems like it's good. Like, but anything that you give up addictions, right? You give up unwanted clothes that you give to the Goodwill, right? You give up things for Passover and for Lent, right? You don't give up children, and that's why when we stay child centered, right, placed, we want to use languages like placed. We want to enter, right? When you enter something, you're placing something. You're not giving up, you're not abandoning, you're not just dejecting. So yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. I love that you're going to be using more trauma informed language with that. Alrighty, guys. So we're closing. We got about 8 minutes here. I want you guys to understand some key takeaways, right, from this course. So some of the key takeaways that we have are words shape identity and belonging. They do. All words that we use shape all of our identity. They shape our belonging. Language is a part of trauma informed care. You cannot be a caregiver and not use trauma informed language. And when you leave this course, I want to encourage you guys to continue this education, right? Continue looking for other sources, resources, books, educational classes like this one that kind of teach you, but then also jog your memory. I only get 2 hours, and I can only teach so much. But part of all my education is to encourage you to go out there, right? And put what we've learned to work, and then also learn some other ways that you can be more trauma informed, especially if you are providing care. I want you to remember that you have the power to model healing communications. Words mean things, and dialogue creates change. So if you want to change a child's life, you can do that just by modeling healing through your words, right? So those are the key takeaways I wanted you guys to take away from this. I am going to provide the screen that I gave you in a PDF. Everyone after this course, you're going to get this PDF of the slides so you can go back and look through it if you would like. You're also going to get your completion for the 2 hours here of CEUs if you need those. Everyone's going to get a certificate of completion. So yeah, the key takeaways is words reshape identity, belonging. Language is a part of trauma informed care, and you have the power. We are the adults, and we have the power to make healing communication. So when closing, I want to say let's make trauma informed language our standard, guys. Let's try to implement it in all areas of our lives, not just as professionals, but as human beings who believe in the powers of words to heal. And that's even personally. I know even lately I haven't even personally been using trauma informed language with some people, but that's a part of being trauma informed. You're always learning, you're always growing, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to say, yeah, that wasn't the best thing I've said. Because that's also part of being trauma informed, is saying, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. There was a better way for me to say that. Let me look up a different way to say that, and let me look up a different way to express my feelings in a way that centers a person, even if I'm having a disagreement with them. So I want to thank you all for coming today to Say It Safer, a trauma informed course. Like I said, you guys will be getting your certificates in probably at the end of the day or tomorrow. We do have about 6 more minutes, so we have an open Q&A. Is there any questions that anyone had that we didn't go over? Any insight? Any opinions, even about the course? We have about 5 to 6 minutes. The panel is open. Alrighty. No? Wait, we have one thing in the chat. Thank you for having this course. You are so welcome. Trying to catch up with some chat. Oh wait, hold on. They can't say nothing because they're all hidden. Hold on. You're the only one that wasn't hidden. Hold on, guys. Oops. There we go. Wait. There we go. I was like, here, anybody got any opinions? And I didn't even let you guys have an opinion. All right, I think everybody is unhidden, right? Hold on. There we go. Everybody should be unhidden now. All right, you can go ahead, guys, and just add in what you would like. Ashley?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much for having this. I love your books. I'm always following along, seeing what I can go to. If you ever come back to Ohio to speak and do a book signing, I can't wait. I'll be first in line again.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
thank
we'll
you.
West Coast line, our West Coast part pretty soon. I appreciate it and thank you so much for coming. I hope that it was beneficial and I hope that you just learned some things today. Asia or Akira or Hope or is Ron if you're still in the comment section or Diane if you're still in the comment section. Questions, comments?
I
I
think
don't
this
think.
was really. Oh, sorry.
No, go
Sorry.
ahead, Asia. Go ahead.
I think this was really fun, actually. And it was really just really, I would say, very open and down to earth. I'm trying to put the words together. But you did a good job. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I try to run these
Yes.
courses kind of like I do my lives a little bit because I do think that having human interaction does
Mm-hmm.
help all of our brains. Also, it gives me
Right.
as a mentor like a moment to kind of take a breath, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just
Yes.
to speak for 2 hours straight or 3 hours straight. But I also think it builds community. That's one thing about on my
Right.
life that a lot of people like. But I do understand that things get crazy over there. So I like
Right.
to have these smaller sessions where it's just like people who just genuinely want to hear and learn. Because yes, we can go over the same things on TikTok Live or Instagram Live, but it's gonna get crazy. It's gonna get hectic. It's gonna be people saying the N word, F slurs, crazy. But this is a great
Right.
where we can all just meet, get together, share some ideas, build community, and bounce off experiences with one another. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Akira.
I was just gonna say, thank you. I appreciate just how thought provoking this space has been for me. And yeah, just really reminding me of how much I don't know and like just taking away the judgment of that. Like it's okay that I don't know everything. um and no one expects me to know everything, but for me to like really make a concerted effort to learn more and to just be open in those moments when maybe I don't phrase things in a great way, to just be open to change, be open to learning. So I don't know. This is just very thought provoking. Um, I saw the video that you had posted with some of the phrases, and like some of them I definitely was like, oh yeah, I would never say that. And then, something like, given up for adoption, that I think is such a common phrase used in our society. And so that like gave me pause of just like, oh my gosh, well, what else is out there that I'm saying that I haven't thought twice about? And so, yeah, I just appreciate your approach and, um, yeah, the compassion to be non-judgmental towards ourselves, but also using non-judgmental language with children is just, it's really, really important. They're sponges.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and it was really important for me um, to when I started off, with the crazy ones like crack me, because of course
Yes.
no one's gonna say that, right? But then when you slowly got into it, it was like actually these are phrases that I might have used, right? And what you'll start to see if you continue your own trauma informed language and being trauma informed is always remember putting people first, right? So anything that you see, I'm trying to think of anything rather like be anything, right? Someone said homeless person, right? That's a great, even though that's a different community, right, and a different issue. If you're using person first language in all of your words and in all of your interactions, it's going to be trauma informed, right? So what you'll find is you'll be having conversations and you'll be like, wait, that wasn't person first. I just put their issue in front of the person, right? So you'll start to see that in your life. And I encourage you to, like you said, slow down and say, whoa, maybe I can say this a little bit different, right? So yeah, I appreciate you coming and I appreciate you guys all coming. We're right on time at 11 o'clock today. So that was fantastic. We kept it right on time. Like I said, I will send you guys the PDF of the course that we went over. You guys will also get a link of the video that we went over just so you can review it. And if you ever want to go back, and you are more than welcome to share it. With anyone that you think that might want to hear it. So it's going to be a private link just for you guys for purchasing the course. So you're more than welcome to share that. The course will be available for purchase for anyone who wants to just purchase it, the link themselves, but you guys will get it for free. And of course, you'll get a continued educational unit certificate that just says you completed the Stay Safer course with dealer management for 2 hours. You can just frame it or give it to your agency or anything you want. But I really appreciate you guys coming, and I'm really encouraged to continue more of smaller courses like this. I think for me, having such a large platform and being so large with so many big different opinions, this is more where my passion is. My passion is really educating on a smaller amount of people, because I feel like I get more done when I can do 4 or 5 or 10 people compared to 80 to 90 people in one space. So I appreciate you guys. I will be emailing you guys. We do have a course coming up in January. It's a policing course. We're going to be interviewing a police officer. He's going to be educating us on how to be trauma informed and teaching our children how to interact with police. So I'll be sending you all emails about that. It's going to be a fantastic course. We've been working on it just like we worked on this one, and I think it's going to be really inspiring as well. So I want to thank you all for being here. And like I always say,